In this video, we are going to focus about Romanticism, and specifically we are going to focus on England as a case study. Now, Romanticism was a movement that gained steam during the late 18th and 19th centuries. First and foremost, we have to understand Romanticism as a reaction. Newton's third law of motion states that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. And this applies to human relationships as well. And the Romantic movement is a reaction against the Industrial Revolution. As we know, the world had changed a lot after the Industrial Revolution. Factories, steam engines, machinery, it created a new mechanical look to the society. This created a whole new world for the people to live in, and it had a lot of harmful effects which we'll talk about.
So, here are some effects of the Industrial Revolution. The first thing that we see is the exploitation of child labor. Now, one of the most negative effects was the condition in cities. Families, in order to support themselves in these cities, often sent their children to work. So, from a very young age, children were expected to support through various factory jobs. These factory jobs were highly dangerous. Kids were killed on a regular basis, lost limbs, permanently maimed. And this became quite normal in the industrialized society.
The second thing we see here is the environmental damage. The use of chemicals and fuel in factories resulted in increased air and water pollution and an increased use of fossil fuels. Moreover, with the erosion of buildings in a massive scale, this resulted in a massive destruction of flora and fauna. Now, if you look at this picture, we see in the distance these smokestacks, these dirty factories, and then you see at the bottom of the picture the landscape with people and with animals, and you can see the beauty of the countryside contrasted with the darkness of this urbanized city.
Social conditions. Now, due to the long war between England and France, what happened is unemployment, low wages, and heavy taxation. So once the war ended between England and France, people were in a really poor condition due to unemployment and heavy taxation. Moreover, there was the massacre of Peterloo and Rios over the Reform Bill of 1832 that resulted in a lot of chaos.
Finally, overpopulation. The industrial labor opportunities drove people to the cities from the countryside to such an extent that in 1750, only 15% of the population of Britain lived in towns. By 1850, over 50% of the entire population of Great Britain lived in either a town or a city, and by 1900, it was 85%. So, here we have a graphic organizer. It looks like we've got two columns comparing the Enlightenment, or what we call the Age of Reason, and Romanticism. Now, while the Enlightenment is about reason, Romanticism is about passion and emotion. And while the Enlightenment emphasizes human nature, Romanticism just emphasizes nature. And while the Enlightenment is about man trying to understand nature and triumph over nature, the Romantics take a step back and think, wow, let's stand in awe of nature and the power it has over us. The Enlightenment is forward looking, emphasizing progress, emphasizing where we are going, what we have to gain, whereas Romanticism is backward looking, about what we've lost and trying to retain as much of that as possible.
Next, let's take a look at the literary features of Romanticism. We have simple and artistic language, awe for nature, strong senses, emotions and feelings, celebration of the individual, importance of imagination. Number 1. Simple and artistic language. The Romantic Age poets preferred simple and artistic language because they wrote for the common people. Therefore, they did not use flowery language or tough language like that of the writers of the Augustan age. So, you can easily read and understand a poem of Wordsworth, whereas it will really take you some time to understand a poem of Alexander Pope. Number 2. Awe for nature. Nature was a dominant theme in Romantic poetry, understood to represent the divine presence in the world and a source of beauty, innocence and solace to humankind. It was a power and a force in its own right, something divine. So, the Romantic Age poets, they idealized rural life. They believed that nature is the place of spiritual truth. In order to stay connected to our humanity in this hustle bustle of city life, we need to connect with nature. Number 3. Strong senses, emotions and feelings. So, the Romantic Age was a revolt against the logic and rationalism of the Age of Enlightenment. Therefore, feelings, emotions gained the center stage in the Romantic Age. Number 4. Celebration of the individual. Romantics emphasized individualism and rebellion over social stability. So, in order for an industrialized society to function well, there has to be order. People have to know where they are supposed to be. They have to show up for work on time. They have to do all these things in order that the factories will function well. Romantics saw that as stifling individualism, stifling what makes our own human beings. So they emphasized and resisted that emphasized individualism. Number 5. Importance of imagination. So, if you see some poems of the Romantic Age, such as Coleridge's Christopher, you will find supernatural elements. It is because imagination was celebrated during the Romantic Age. So these were the literary features of the Romantic Age.
Now, let's take a look at the Romantic poets. We'll be discussing the poets from our syllabus, and that would be William Wordsworth, William Blake, and finally, John Keats. William Wordsworth. 1770 to 1850. Wordsworth was one of the first and most well-known of the Romantic poets. He lived in the Lake District, which is particularly the beautiful part of England. He emphasized the value of childhood experience and the celebration of nature. Some of his notable works were To a Snowdrop, Daffodils, and Slumber Did My Spirit Seal. William Blake, 1757 to 1827. Now, William Blake was a Romantic poet, painter, and also a printmaker. He wrote several poems known chiefly for the songs of innocence, songs of experience, and some of his major works were The Lamb, The Tiger, The Chimney Sweepers. Finally, John Keats, 1795 to 1821. Keats died when he was 26, but in his short span of life, he wrote many of the famous poems. He was never appreciated by literary critics during his lifetime, but posthumously did. Ode to a Nightingale, Ode to Autumn, The Eve of Saint Agnes were some of his major works. And that's it. We've come to the end of our presentation. Hope you liked our video and thank you very much for listening.